Hi, everybody. Welcome to class one of our cosmic sacred contract. I'm so used to saying sacred contracts, but this time we're going big, we're going cosmic. And I wanted to explore the archetypal journey that we all share because we are the engines of the events that happen in our lives. And um, these two have archetypal patterns built into them. So, first of all, I want to start by presenting the metaphor that I'll use throughout this, which is the building metaphor that many of you now are familiar with. But for those who don't, I want to get us all on the same page by defining certain terms and before I do my overview. And so the first is that I frequently refer to a building metaphor, which is itself sort of an archetype now for me anyway. But it works to um, help you get a handle on how consciousness really works in a very practical way. And as I tell everybody, how this actually happened uh, to me was that I was in New York and I was visiting a friend. It was a hot August day, and the ground level was filled with cabs and trash on the streets because they don't have alleys and et cetera, et cetera. And it was so hot. And that's what I mostly remember about that day is how hot it was. And when I went into her building and I took the elevator up to her floor, she had a very high, um, she lived in a high floor, and I don't remember what number, but she had a balcony and it had flowers on it, and she had two little chairs. This is high end real estate there. She brought out two iced teas, and we sat there and we watched the sun go down. And as I relaxed off the street, off the heat, out of the heat, I realized that I had this incredible view of New York that I didn't have on the ground level. I could see the Hudson River. I could see it was spectacular. And then of course as the evening wore on and the lights started to go on, New York glistens. And I thought, you know what? If I only was on the first floor of this same building and someone said to me, you live near the Hudson River, I could easily have said, no, I don't, because I can't see it from the first floor. And I thought to myself, you know what? That's really like what life is. If we thought of ourselves as when we're born, like being a building, and once you're built, there are certain things about you that cannot be changed. You can't change where you're born. There are certain things you cannot change your background. You can't change your ethnic background. You can't change your DNA. I mean, there are certain things that are a given, and that's the structure of your building. And so, in a sense, from the time your building is constructed, your life is constructed, the country you're born in, all of the pieces of you are constructed. All of your movement, like being in a building, all of your movement takes place within the building. Your option is to move up. And that with each floor, like in a building, with each floor you go up, you get a much grander view of the same address, that really is your life. You get to see more and more and more, a wider view of where you've always been, of who you've always been, but your interior is what changes, and your capacity to see more, your capacity to understand more. And of course, the ultimate place in yourself, in your building, is what we could think of as the penthouse. And in the penthouse, which is, of course, not unlike in a true building piece of real estate, it is the most expensive part of your building, which means you have to work hardest to afford getting to your penthouse. Just like in a real building, every floor is more expensive than the one below it. It's harder to get to. You have to work harder, and it is The taxes are higher. Everything about rising in yourself is an effort. And yet the view gets better. And as you get up, you to higher and higher floors, the view becomes more spectacular. The air becomes cleaner. You can't hear the traffic as much. So your relationship with the outside world shifts, and it becomes more remote as your relationship with your inside world becomes more animated, becomes more elegant, becomes more beautiful. So really you start shifting your relationship. Now, when you're on the first floor, when you're in the first floor of your life, or in the first floor of your building, that's your least safe. You have to put bars on the windows, make sure your doors are locked, make sure you're secure, because you're in the ground level of the physical world where you are most vulnerable. And and here you are most vulnerable to your own thoughts. That's where your thoughts are most saturated with what Buddha would call illusions. That's where you are most likely to believe things that are not the truth. Maybe something that is true, but it's not the truth. And like, for example, it's true that today is Tuesday, but it's not the truth, because in Australia, it's not Tuesday. So truth means that it is universal. It applies equally to everyone all the time. Truth does not change. It is a constant. When you're on the first floor, you are dealing with things that come and go. It's here or there. It's a fact today and it's fiction tomorrow. This is where life is most dicey. And so survival of your consciousness is all about, I got to get off this floor, because this is where conflict starts. This is where things are most confusing and most chaotic, and that's on the first floor of the building. But as you rise and you start to see more, and you're able to put more pieces together, you're able to understand the world and your world, anyone's world, in a broader and wider perspective, to get a 360 view. The most empowering type of knowledge that you can get. So in the first floor, it's information. But as you rise, you stop seeking information and you seek knowledge, truth, that which is a constant. And when you get to the penthouse, the type of knowledge that you want to accrue is the capacity to understand archetypal patterns. On the first floor, you'd ask, what's going on with my life? What's the nature of my life? What's happening with mine? So the word my plays a significant role when you're in the first floor. But by the time you start making a journey up the floors in yourself, and you evolve in your consciousness, there comes a time when you realize that the journey of life is not about acquiring things for yourself and asking about what's the purpose of my life, but rather, what is the purpose of life? What is the purpose of life? And if I can figure out the purpose of life, I will fit into that purpose. I will fit myself in to this greater cosmic purpose, which is what we're going to be examining in our time together, is a view from that altitude. What is the design of life? And I will fit my life into that design. What are the rules of life? Not what's the purpose of my life, because I won't play. I know people who somehow think life should revolve around them. And that's not the purpose of life. The purpose of life is to understand how life is designed and the rules of life. And when you're in your penthouse, when you get to the penthouse, the type of knowledge that is most potent, most valuable is the capacity to understand the archetypal dynamics that are at work in life. The archetypal dynamics, like the laws of the universe, cause and effect, action and reaction, how they work, and then how your choices engage those laws. And therefore, how potent your choices are. And therefore, it elevates your consciousness so that you think, I've got to be careful with all my choices because I am powerful. And every choice I make is powerful. And then to understand at the penthouse level, the power of myths and symbols, and that you start realizing that you have been drawn to myths and symbols your entire life, that these inner narratives that you have always created for yourself, the things that have meaning for you, you think that's why that has meaning for me. That's why these symbols mean something to me. That world of myths, of symbols, of archetypes, this is the world of cosmic language, the cosmic alphabet, the cosmic communication system. And it is impersonal, totally impersonal. And it is my deep belief, I can't prove this at all, cannot prove it at all. So this is one of those things you take and you let it sit in you for a while and see if it makes any sense. But I deeply believe that we were born already knowing this, that we come from cosmic goods. That is our natural habitat. That is the habitat of our soul. So we come from cosmic origins. And so symbolic language and cosmic language and the nature of myths, which are beliefs that are largely based in our need to understand how God works. These are instinctive to us. Instinctive to us. I'll give you an example of what I mean. One of the behaviors that most people recognize in themselves is the need to label people right away, is to label someone, is, like you'll be sitting outside at a coffee, having a cup of coffee with somebody, and people walk by and you automatically, it is instantaneous. You automatically say, that person looks like a geek, or that person looks like she's a good mother, or that person looks like a slob, or that person, whatever it is. And we call that labeling. We call that but it's not labeling, it's archetypes. Because if you said, I think that person is an absolute, I bet that person's a hoarder. You don't have to define that for people. If you said that person's a geek, you don't have to say, and by geek, I mean everybody who knows that word knows is you are communicating an entire psychic map with that one word. And it wouldn't occur to you to say, I have just used an archetype and I have just communicated to you an entire archetypal pattern. And so I think you probably understand what is involved. You don't do that. You just assume the other person understands instantaneously the content of that archetypal pattern. Even though you don't use the word, you might use a word that is more in the common parlance, like label. You're labeling somebody. And if it's a negative one, you're judging them, but you're still labeling them. And that label is instantly communicated. And so everyone knows. And if someone said, do you think a geek would look great in a tuxedo? Or do you think a geek would be more comfortable in say, cargo pants and sneakers? Everybody would likely say the cargo, or I'd say 90% would go with cargo pants, because that's part of the geek archetype. and our instinct to label people is absolutely part of our survival mechanism. We do it automatically. And when I say it's part of our cosmic makeup, from the place from which we have come, it is built into our soul to recognize archetypal patterns in each other. When I do workshops, and I love doing them in person because I get to do these kinds of things. When I do workshops in person, one of the things I love to do is have people sit opposite people they have not yet even spoken to. So I have to get them early. And I'll say, all right, don't even talk to each other, and pick out 6 archetypes that just by being in that person's energy field, pick out 6 archetypes. And in fact, you probably could pick out more, but you can just sense that's how good all of you are at this. And what's really shocking is when it's always funny because people are so shocked when they realize that they are as transparent to others as others are to them, because usually people think it's just them who is looking at the world, them who are looking at the world and able to do all of this, archetypal labeling, if you will, or whatever. But in fact, people are looking at you, and they can see you just as clearly or just as obviously. And they're just as good at seeing what you're not as seeing what you believe me. Nobody would ever look at me and say, now there goes an athlete. I mean, you'd have to have a bag over your head to say, well, I think Carolyn's an athlete. Are you nuts? I mean, but I would bet 90% would say, I think she's a teacher. Doesn't she look like a teacher? It's a college professor. I mean, I drip teacher. There it is. I don't even have to say anything. It's like, she looks like an academic. She looks like a teacher. I mean, I'd love to have like the goddess Athena or Aphrodite or something, but it's just not my archetype. It just didn't happen this lifetime. But the archetypes that I have are so obvious. So what I'm saying is this capacity to read the archetypes in other people is a survival instinct in us. We do it all the time. And we do it as a way, I think, of identifying the power that in other people, because we are power creatures and we want to sense the nature of the power of what the power lay of the land is in every single room we walk into. We do it automatically. This is part of our survival mechanism. So when we walk into a place, our instincts instantaneously start scanning the place and every single person in there. That at an archetypal level, we are saying friend, foe, adversary, competitor, rapist, victim, addict, prey, friend, companion. What we are constantly scanning and asking ourselves those types of questions when we walk in and we meet people, and if our alarm goes off, it's because one or two of the archetypes that alarm us has been activated. We are uncomfortable because we sense something. We sense an archetypal pattern somehow that is not harmonious with us. Now, that being said, let me just hit a pause button here. You realize I'm speaking in what is most common. There are also people that just go in the room and they're always scared of everything, and that's a different animal entirely. And I am speaking about in general. So I need to just make that clear. Now, that said, this is this capacity to sense out archetypes also explains things like how addicts can go into a city and within 20 minutes hook up with other addicts, and how they just can sense each other out. How victims, people who radiate victim, are how people who are aggressive and they're looking for victims can find people like that so easily. It is an archetypal sensory system. We just can sense that. We can sense that. Just like, I mean, you can almost sense the archetype of the Good Samaritan in somebody. And if your instincts are clear, you can sense when somebody is a con artist. I mean, you can sense that. Like, I can't trust this person. I just can't trust this person. Now, I'm going to return to the building. When your consciousness is on the first floor, and we're going to talk about evolving consciousness, but not right now. I just want to use the building as a metaphor. When your consciousness is on the first floor of your life, you are not thinking in terms of symbolic language or the archetypal world or myths. You are thinking literally and physically, and you're in the moment. Let me give you an example of that. The other day I was driving home and it was pouring. It was pouring rain and the roads were slippery. And for a period of 15 minutes, the driving was really, really bad. And in those 15 minutes, I was incredibly intensely focused on driving. My windshield wipers were going like crazy. I was glued to the wheel and to the road and so exactly, I'm sure all of you have had driving experiences like that. You know exactly what it's like. You can't afford to be distracted. You are fully and totally in the ground, on the earth, present, because and that is what it's like to be fully in physical form. Okay. At that point, in that situation, the last place you are and the last type of conversation you want to have is someone coming in and saying, I want you to imagine this. You're on the first floor and imagination is like eighth, seventh, eighth. You can't go up that high. You can't reach that place. You can't take the elevator and zoom up to imagination. You have to stay focused in the literal world with what is actually happening, and your five senses completely attuned to everything, because it's about not crashing and not sliding and not getting into an accident. And it's important for me to emphasize this because there's such a difference between your literal consciousness and the consciousness of your imagination and the consciousness of the symbolic world. The symbolic, when you are able to release the hold your five sensory world has on you and ascend within yourself to a very different level of consciousness. So, and you need to ascend to a different level of consciousness to understand what a sacred contract is. If you're on your first floor, and I know this from experience of decades of teaching contracts, that so many students through the years, especially when I taught sacred contracts for many, many years here in Chicago, that people want their contracts to be something physical, something specific, something they could get their hands around. Like, I have a contract to be a teacher at this college. Like, you actually get a contract for that. But contracts are mystical documents. They're mystical. They're archetypal. So it's really important to understand that they impact your first floor. They most certainly impact the first floor of your life. But they are they're not literal so that you can hold them in your hand on the first floor of your life. Mystical agreements have more to do with your inner growth and your interior development, and what challenges and opportunities, relationships, etc., that are going to be a part of the fabric of your life. And these are hidden within the content of the archetypal patterns that you have. So, one way to think about this is that if you had an archetypal pattern to deal with hamburger, right? And what you did with that, and I walked into the kitchen and I saw that you had hamburger. And I knew that you have got to figure out a way to cook that, to work with it, to understand the nature of hamburger. Now, you could either end up being a burger chef, or you could discover the best recipe for bolognese ever in the universe and continue making one exquisite dish after another. Everything depends on how the choices you make to empower yourself. But you have a contract to work with burgers, to work with hamburger. And so that is how I want you to understand a contract, is that there is a certain ingredient that you have been assigned to deal with, and that you are under contract with. And so how that unfolds will be told through the narratives of your archetypal patterns, governed by those. So we'll get more on that later. But it is absolutely, and I mean, maybe it's I think maybe easiest to understand by using the addict archetype, because the addict is so common. So many people have the addict archetype, but it doesn't determine what you'll be addicted to or how that addiction will play out. But it does say that you will confront a need that is far stronger than your reason. You will crave something that is in an unreasonable way, and you'll have to battle that craving. And you may be addicted to attention. You may be addicted to lying. You may be addicted to stealing. You may be addicted, what is that called? Kleptomania. You may be addicted to a substance, to cocaine, to alcohol. It doesn't, whatever the addiction is, but the contract is that you will have something on the outside that has a controlling force over you, and you will confront that. There it is. Now, and I go back to the building because the more you can approach your life and your challenges in a symbolic way, get and your contracts, from wanting to see them literally to melting through the need for a literal form, to I need to see that one ingredient as symbolically as I can. As odd as this sounds, the choice to see things symbolically brings the most clarity. It brings the most clarity. The need to see things literally blinds you. Isn't that funny? But the choice to see things symbolically brings all the clarity. And the need to see things literally is when you go blind, is when you can't see anything at all. It's just, we are such interesting creatures. Now, I'm going to return to the building again and again and again because it works so well. Because everything in life is about what floor do you want to see this through? What floor do you want to understand this on? Do you want to see this literally, or do you want to understand it through an archetypal pattern? Do you want to do that? And that is a huge choice. And the capacity to access and see something through your archetypal pattern is so significant because it's the most empowering choice you can make. And at the same time, it is a very challenging choice because you really have to detach from words like blame and deserve, and you have to become very impersonal about yourself. We'll get to that later. This is not the night for that, but it's the night to introduce the building. Now, sacred contracts in general are cosmic assignments, and they are governed and energized through the content and the myths of the archetypal patterns involved. So we don't just fall from trees. We just don't fall. Life is as chaotic as life looks. And there is chaos. But even chaos is an archetypal pattern. Even chaos has order to it. It's the order of chaos, but it is order according to the archetype of chaos. Isn't that crazy? But it's true. And so everything has its timing. And I find it fascinating that, when people have had near-death experiences, one of the common comments or stories they tell is that they were all told, you have to get back in your body. It's not your time. It's not your time. And so they've had to return to their body and continue on with their life because it wasn't their time. Timing is as sometimes you may think there is no order to your life, or there's nothing happening, or what's going on with my life, as if it's not moving fast enough for you. But that's you. The fact is, everything is according to order. And that is the fact. And because we can't see the order, because we're viewing from our first floor, because we don't have a larger view, that's when we feel the most panic-stricken about not knowing what's going on in our lives. We can't see the whole, but contracts, and this is what I love to teach most, are agreements that your life is in motion and that there are patterns in motion in your life as well. Now, in understanding what your archetypal pattern is, it helps you to understand the nature of the types of opportunities, or the nature of what draws you, the nature of what makes you who you are. In the third session, we'll get to your personal archetypes, not tonight. The third and the fourth, we'll deal with your personal archetype, but not tonight. It's important this evening to understand that the sacred contracts the cosmic assignments that we have as individuals are form the journey of our lives. And that's on the micro. And on the macro, we in turn create the larger events in the outside world. They too are products of archetypal contracts. They too are a combination of all of our energies combining, creating the larger events that happen in the world, from pandemics to wars to peace to environmental to climate change. All of these are products of us. They just don't happen. Nothing just happens. We have an energetic hand in everything. And we'll deal with the power of choice and consequence later. But let us just say that our individual contracts are bound to the collective contracts that unfold within life. There's a reason why we are attracted to certain causes. There's a reason why we are called to do certain things, to participate in certain, why people who are advocates participate in events on behalf of other people. There's reasons why we have the patterns that we do that then feed into the larger patterns that make the world run. Like revolution and evolution. And I use this. They're a team. And they are two classic cosmic archetypal patterns, revolution and evolution. They need each other. A revolution generates evolution. Evolution generates revolution. They just are constantly flowing like this. And this archetypal dynamic, it's a dynamic, like cause and effect, a dynamic, an archetypal dynamic, a law. But there's archetypal patterns that are natural to this dynamic, that this dynamic sort of generates energy, and that our certain archetypal patterns are naturally feed off of the energy of revolution and evolution. For example, and see if you relate to any of these: the warrior, the victim, the hero, the knight, the slave, the visionary, the entrepreneur, the inventor, the explorer, the prostitute, the rogue, the mercenary, the healer, the traitor, the patriot, the martyr. These are some of the archetypes that relate intimately to the dynamic of revolution, the rebel, the revolution and evolution. That if these archetypal patterns are in your contract, your sacred contract, your union of 12, that you are someone who will find your way to a revolution and an evolution pattern in some way in the outside world as well as your inside world, that it will be a part of you. It will most definitely be a part of you. And this pattern will lead you, will cause you, will inspire you, will be part of the need to transform something, whether it's transforming yourself or transforming a business, a revolution in a business, or becoming part of a union, or it doesn't have to be a revolution in the street. But it does mean that wherever it is that you are, the Me Too movement, that the standard, status quo has to change and become, it has to evolve. And you will be part of the engine of that evolution to the next step if you have any of those archetypes, because it's instinctive to you to want to participate in that. Archetypes make it, it's in your nature. It's in your nature. And if you don't have an archetypal pattern that relates to revolution, evolution, as it were, you know, it just it won't be part of your life in that same way. It just won't be part of your life. You know, it's just fascinating to me how these patterns plug us in to patterns that work on the collective. It's just absolutely fascinating. Now, I really love when I have to change seats here. You can only sit for so long in a certain position. You when I'm teaching this in a class, I absolutely look at this thing is crooked. I never get anything straight here. When I'm teaching this in a class and I'm with you, I absolutely love to hit a pause button and say, okay, I need some of your archetypal patterns so I can work with them when I'm talking. And I wish I could do that. This is when I feel like I just wish I could just squeeze the archetypal patterns right out of you. But I'm holding you all in my heart because I I am trying to pick up your archetypal patterns as we speak, and I'm hoping that I'll be mentioning most of them throughout the course of the class. Now, here's a rule. As we look at the power of the cosmic field and archetypes and exploring the archetypal journey we share, I want to emphasize it's a journey we share, that we share this. And why I wanted to do this class is because I absolutely believe that one of the archetypal dynamics that is having such a profound impact on everything, absolutely everything, is the archetype of transformation. And I've taught it now for a few years, maybe more than that, but I cannot emphasize it enough that if we were on the first floor of the building, it looks like chaos and things are out of control, and there's inflation, and there's this, and there's pandemics, and there's all this chaos is happening. But if I could, for just right now, tell you I'm taking you in the elevator and we're shooting up to the penthouse right now. We're gonna go faster than ever before, and we're all gonna just be in the penthouse. And from the penthouse, I want you to view everything that's going on, even though you won't understand it, even though I've taken you up here faster than I should. I just want you to be up here for a second in the penthouse of your life, in the penthouse of life. And up here, you are away from your personal life. You all the concerns of your personal life. Up here, we would never have a conversation in which you'd say, yeah, but no. All that stuff is gone. You long ago, somewhere in the fourth, fifth, you stopped personalizing everything. And you get impersonal about your own life. And you realize, this is just my life, this lifetime. And and now you're up in the penthouse. And from up here, all you want to do is understand. You don't want to do battle. You don't want to contradict. You don't want to bring up all your stuff. You simply want to understand. You simply want knowledge. And from up here, we look at all that is happening within human evolution at this time. And we realize as we look that what's happening is that this life force called power is reshaping the dynamic of the human experience. It's reshaping it incredibly. It is, and for all kinds of reasons, because a profound time of evolution itself is happening. A profound time of evolution. What kind of evolution? What's the dynamics of it? Well, this calls for me to move my leg up on my other leg. Since we entered the nuclear age, we have been evolving into the age of energy, energy consciousness, energy technology, energy communication, energy. We are leaving the world of matter and literally shifting into the world of energy. This damn blouse, I'm never going to wear this again. Into the world of energy. In some regards, we are developing more of a relationship with the energetic side of life than with the matter side, right? Nobody before the age of energy, the nuclear age, had to schedule time to be in their bodies the way we do today. Today, we are so involved in our energy life, our computers, our technology, our energetic world, that we have to schedule time to visit our physical form and be in our body. To go to the gym, we have to buy special clothing for our physical body to take it to the gym, and then make sure we buy it a drink along the way, like a low-fat soy, non-caffeine, mocha, chino, whatever the hell it is, Tai Chi drink. And we have to do all of these things as a reward for being back in our body. So we have to make sure our senses are enhanced for being back in our body, because we prefer the energetic realm. Now, this is such a big deal to get this, that our senses have expanded. We are no longer five sensory. We are multi-sensory. We are living we have moved into the psychic era, the psychic dynamic era. All of this, we are transforming, and this transformation is transforming the matter of our body, the matter of our psyche, the matter of our neurology. We've developed energy disorders, autism, bipolar, all kinds of things are shifting in our energetic dynamics, because we are expanding our energetic field. And so we're taking in more energy than before. And we have to adjust. We have to evolve to open up passageways to take in more energy than we've ever had before. That amount of energy. Now follow me here. And I want to say, put your hands up if you don't understand me. That capacity to take on more energy is changing our relationship with time, space, and matter itself. The more light and energy we take in, the faster we comprehend something. The faster we comprehend something, the faster we act on it. We experience this as saying time is going faster. One of the truths that is very hard to understand is that we have created what we call time. And so as our consciousness is shifting, so is our relationship with this thing we call time. So is it actually speeding up? Yes. All right. So we'll deal with that in a minute, which is why at the same time we talk about living longer, because time is speeding. So this is all of that, mishigash. Okay. So this place in the penthouse, as we look at transformation, what we realize is that we are just at the cusp, just at the beginning of becoming a very different species, of relating to life in a very different way, that of a consciousness about other creatures, about the planet itself, about how to live together, and that the evolutionary code, the code behind all of this is become whole, become whole, become whole. It's time to become whole, because, and at the same time, we are on the cusp of entering the galactic community. So now I want you to stay with me in the penthouse, because here from the penthouse, what that means is that as we enter the galactic community, the myths of the cosmos that have long held together the collective unconscious. So you're in the penthouse with me and you're looking at the whole collective and the myths that have held together, the Christian myths, the Jewish myths, the Islamic myths, the Buddhist myths, all these myths have to be rescripted. They have to be peeled away in their anthropomorphic form so that the jewels of truth can emerge and the human form can be released. I'm going to say this again. Any religion that is represented by a human being, that form has to be shifted so that the deeper truth of what the teachings, their mystical content can emerge. And what is their mystical content? That is all of what they have in common are the mystical laws of the universe. The mystical laws, the formation of how this universe functions, the laws by which it functions, and the forms by which it functions. And that includes, like, for example, as above, so below. As above, so below. All is one. The laws of cause and effect, and action, reaction, and the law of integration, of interconnectedness. These mystical laws reflect the nature of what we call the divine. That there is no off-planet God that looks just like us from the penthouse. There is no such thing as a God that has a religion. Humans have religions. There is no God that has a religion. And as we are about to make contact with other communities of life, the earth-centric theology that has characterized this planet, with gods that look just like us, behave just like us, have legal systems like us, actually care about our sexuality and how we behave in a bedroom, this nonsense, this other nonsense, that has to evaporate. And in its place will emerge a bio-spiritual ecology theology, an ecological theology that recognizes the divine is written in the laws of the universe, the organizational systems of the universe, the consistency of the universe, of which archetypal patterns are a major focus. They are the consistency of our psychic fields. They tell us exactly how our inner dynamic works at an impersonal level. So you have as above, so below. You have choice and consequence. You have action and reaction. You have the law of karma. You have the law of interconnection. And then we begin to realize that all life breathes together. And if these are the connecting laws of the universe, then it is these laws that should govern the choices we make. It is these laws that really should govern how it is we make choices about our health. That our health is governed by the impulse of holism. And therefore, if our personal health is governed by holism, remember, this is the archetypal journey that we all share. If our personal health is governed by holism, so too, our collective world has to be governed by holism, and we have to make choices accordingly. And with that in mind, I'm going, as I talk about archetypal patterns later, your personal ones, I want you to keep in mind that the lessons of your life, no matter what your personal package looks like, for all of you who have healer archetypes, or for all of you who have mother archetypes, or all of us, we all have child archetypes. Our personal experience with each of these archetypes is very different. But the impersonal dynamic of what it is we're under contract to learn, to become, that impulse to grow toward holism, to become whole, that is a contract we share. That is an impulse. It is leading us all toward becoming whole. How that plays out in each of our lives is a different level of contract. But that little jewel that says what's really going on here, everything is moving toward holism. And if I looked at the gravity field of absolutely everything, it's when I do not act toward the whole that I make the most foolish choices. And no matter what archetypal pattern you're in, and we'll get into that, but not tonight, when I'm talking more personally, but this is what I mean by understanding a contract in the cosmic sense, the ones that we share. All of us are under that evolutionary contract to become whole, to move toward holism. And if you look at the collective events that are occurring and will continue to occur, they all have that. For example, the pandemic, an event that stopped the whole, that impacted the whole, that requires the whole to heal, that as I said a couple of years ago when I did a class called the Phoenix, what occurred to me is, and I certainly spoke about transformation during that class too, but what occurred to me when this pandemic erupted was that, the atmosphere, the collective atmosphere, which is something we all participate in generating. And the collective atmosphere had this sense that we were anticipating something. Were we anticipating a terrorist attack? Were we anticipating a nuclear explosion? We were anticipating something like living in a great big huge boil that had to be lanced. And we could feel it, but nothing was getting lanced. Nothing was happening, but we could sense it. We could sense it. And how that, I think, expressed itself with younger people is that their sense of optimism, their sense of longevity, their sense of, being able to do something incredible with their life was not as dynamic as it was when I was younger, or for people in their 60s or 50s, but rather what had become more common is depression, anxiety, suicide amongst them, because this sense that something is going to abort the length of life, that we just can't count on it, that it's just so chaotic, that everything is changing. And even though there were changes when I was growing up, there was the Vietnam War, there was this, nevertheless, we had a sense that there was a future that we were going to participate in. And that sense is really, really, really not as clear or evident or trustworthy. Is the government still going to be here? Are we still going to have a democracy? Are we still going to, what about this? What about, and then you have a pandemic. Then the pandemic comes. And the pandemic brings about this eruption of psychic exhaustion, immune exhaustion, a collective archetypal event, and physically, because it was as if everyone said, I can't take it anymore. I'm just exhausted. I want to stay home. I want to stay home. I want to rest. I want to isolate. And I look at how many people actually found that it was the best thing in the world for them to rest, to recharge, to find that they didn't want to do that job anymore, that a different level of choice was born, a whole different level for as much chaos as it brought about. It started to reshape in yet another way. And it also shows us that all life breathes together, that in order to heal something like a pandemic, it required us realizing that we have got to do this together or not at all. Together or not at all. That we are all connected to each other's health, and to each other's well-being, which is obviously a lesson we didn't get. But holism is the template that is involved in the activities of our time. You becoming whole is a impulse that is in you now. It is in you. Believe you me, it is thriving in you. I want to talk about other universal patterns that are archetypal, and they are always at work as energetic dynamics that, again, are part of all of our universal, are part of our individual lives, because they are part of the archetypal universal force. One is the phoenix rising from the ashes. And this is a myth I absolutely adore, because it is the nature of God is law, myth, symbol. And it sounds like, God is absolutely impersonal, but the truth is the divine is absolutely intimate. And it's in every single action, every single act of creation, every single law, every single everything. The divine is present because it's built into the laws and built into the system. And it's like you're walking through the breath of God, if we could see clearly. And so the phoenix rising from the ashes is this dynamic that says everything will have its moments of destruction, but out of that destruction will come something. And because that is how life has been structured. And if you want to understand the nature of God, it is law, and law brings order. And law is a promise of what will happen. So when, and this is what I mean by staying in the penthouse with me and understanding that all these laws are working in your life. So if there is a period of destruction, it means there will be opportunities to rise from the ashes. They are a given, they're a guarantee, because they're part of the archetypal dynamic. It isn't, it is a absolute given that opportunity, that a spring will follow your winter. And here is where we'll talk about choice, and how choice and your attitude and your way of working with these cycles, and this is where consciousness comes in, has a great deal to do with how they play out and how soon you rise from the ashes, as it were. Because that you are that extra ingredient. We participate with these laws. They don't work by themselves, they work within us. Death and resurrection, another dynamic in this universe, that we will always lose. Life will die, and it will and life will be born. And death and resurrection is a constant. Revolution and evolution, a constant. And fate and destiny, a constant dynamic. And that one is worth taking a little bit of time with here, because that is a dynamic that's at play every second of your life, every moment, and in every dynamic. So it's good that you have a sense of understanding the archetypes of fate and destiny. You know, absolutely everything about life, everything is about how well we learn something and the quality of choices we make. Everything is about that. And whether the choices we make empower us or not empower us, or whether we make choices that empower others or not, or whether the choices we make disempower others or not, whether we learn from our choices or not, whether we get that the choices that harm others do in fact a great deal of harm to ourselves. I mean, consciousness is everything it's cracked up to be, and it really is the journey from getting the difference between the love of power to the power of love, and really becoming conscious of how powerful it is to choose love, and really coming to terms with how powerful you are and how powerful the actual mechanism of choice is, because it is the use of your soul. It is the use of your willpower to direct an act of creation into motion. And your signature, your soul's signature, is on that act of creation. You've set energy into motion, and that energy blends in the whole, and the whole is influenced by every choice we make. Even if the choice in the privacy of your home, in the privacy of your thoughts, here in the privacy of my office, as I sit here and I read something and I think, that's a really inspiring thought, that inspires me. It inspires me to think positively about this or that. That is a choice. Nobody knows I made that choice. Nobody will ever know it but me and the rest of the universe listening to me. The rest of the universe listening to the fact that I just generated a spark of light, and that light gets contributed to the whole. Now, we are on this path because it's the critical element of your life is choice, and your capacity to manage the power of who you are. And I'll go into that more next class. But when someone can't do that, they can't follow guidance. They're terrified of guidance. And when you're terrified of guidance, what you do is you refer to your history for instruction. And every single thing you think, well, what did I used to do? How did I do this? What did I do? You refer to yesterday for instruction on how to go forward for tomorrow. When yesterday is done, it's done. And you're afraid to try something new. You're terrified. And when you're afraid to try something new and you refer to your history and you refer to how you've always done something and what you've always, instead of listening to guidance, and maybe it's the chance to do something in the unknown, you give in to your fear. And that means you give into fate. You give into the safe path, the known path. You don't fully appreciate that it's that path that has come to an end. The known path, the old path, that in fact you have left it to the fates by going backwards, because you've actually chosen fear. Destiny is when you choose a courageous path, even though you may not have any idea where it's going. You are going by your gut instinct, by your guidance, by this sense of in yourself that this is what I should be doing. This is the direction I should be going. I can feel it. And that's your gut instinct. And that is how destiny is created. It's created because you're sensing the new and you have the self-esteem to follow it. So fate and destiny are always playing out. And it again is an archetypal dynamic. And again, recognizing that you are at a crossroads of fate and destiny is a perspective that you get from the penthouse, where you actually can see, you realize this isn't an ordinary moment. This is a moment of fate and destiny. It looks like I'm just choosing, something small, but in fact, this is a setup. That's this is archetypal visioning. Okay. I wanted to just emphasize that this, as we go into the archetypal patternings that we all share in this extraordinary archetypal universe, I just can't stand this box. This is an orderly universe. For all the chaos that we are experiencing, we're experiencing this chaos because transformation is chaotic. So if this class were like 30 years ago, and I said to you, we are about to enter into transformation. And so this is what you can expect. It is going to be incredibly chaotic because that is the nature of this. So you have to expect that there'll be political chaos, there'll be financial chaos, there'll be environmental chaos, there'll be war, every single system of life that needs to come under the microscope for us to examine in terms of its dynamic. Every single one is going to erupt in this time of transformation, because that is the archetype of transformation. So this isn't prediction. This is the nature of transformation itself. These are the dynamics that need to be transformed. This is all of the patterns that have restricted or governed society are going to come up to look at us. This is not an ordinary transformation. Look at what's happening. Every single species, the climate change, the world currencies, Bitcoin, what do you call those things? That type of, what is the word for it? I'm referring to the currencies that are like Bitcoin. I don't know what they're called, but you know what I'm talking about. The alternative currencies. All these alternative forms are emerging as a way, and there's alternative ideas for how the future should look. And that is emerging now. Now, none of us, you and I, none of us are going to live to see all of this reach the finish line. Not going to happen, but we are living at the beginning. And so this is going to be chaotic. And you're not going to see the next president end the chaos. I mean, it's not going to happen. This is going to go on for years to come because there's so much that needs transforming. But if you understand, this is how the new form will be born out of this, the phoenix in the ashes. This is how it's going to happen. There has to be a lot of the patterns that are breaking down. The idea that, we're the only planet with life on it. That idea is crumbling. This idea that there's a half God, that God looks like a man. This idea is crumbling. And as part of the crumbling, to prevent that, the fundamentalists are rising to hold the fort down, because the progression to that next level of the non-image, the non-human God has to be born. So really, this is the most exciting time to be alive. It is a privilege to be alive now, especially to when you know, when you have a sense of what is going on. You know, I need my glasses. I can't read my notes. When I was doing my notes, I did want to mention that, you know, I had this experience a few years ago when I was teaching a class on Pythagoras. And I had no business doing that. No business whatsoever. I had no business because I can't even add two and two. I mean, I have mathematics is not my field, but this was a mystery school and it was Pythagoras as that. And so because I needed to know something. I have a whole shelf behind me on Pythagoras now. I dived into it and I consumed everything I could on Pythagoras. And I had an experience that really made me almost explode with heat and light when I realized that Pythagoras, the father of mathematics, the father of the musical scale, was, who knows who he really was, but he was at a time that was before the Christian era, before religion got personalized, before God got personalized. And it was a time of when Buddha came, Pythagoras, the Ten Commandments. There was an era during the age of Aries. There was this era when it was all about human beings getting the laws of the universe. This is the laws of mathematics. This is geometry. This is music. Pythagoras knew that the planets had musical notes to them, that there was sounds in the heavens. So he must have traveled there at night. And Plato said, you know what? The gods are just archetypes. They're forms that are holding power. That era was an era when human beings seemed to be able to access how the universe was cosmically constructed. Never mind the way they were on Earth. These messengers were able to describe the laws of the universe as they were, how things were constructed. And they had this sense of this natural order, of that the universe contained an order to it. And as you are standing here with me in the penthouse, one of the archetypal jewels that I want you to really put in your little pouch and hold for the rest of your life is that there is order to your life, that it is an ordered system because everything has order to it. And therefore, for whatever chaotic experience you might have, whatever episode of chaos you might have here or there, the chaotic episode does not change the order, the larger order that is your life, the larger archetypal dynamic that is your life. That there is a pattern to it, there are patterns to it that are working their way through and working themselves in and around you at all times, even though there are episodes of chaos in everybody's life. But from chaos comes order. Now, our role is not to change the laws of nature, as so many people think, or to rule nature and all that nonsense. Our role is to learn the laws of the cosmos and to work with them, to learn what our archetypal patterns are and to work with these patterns in ourselves. Because you cannot be other than what your patterns are. No matter how much you want to perhaps be an entrepreneur or an actress or an actor or a whatever, if you don't have that pattern, it'll never happen. It will never, never, never happen. It's not possible because it is those patterns that activate the laws of the universe for you. They energize cause and effect, action and reaction, choice and magnetic attraction. All of this is animated through your archetypal patterns. And if you don't have a pattern, no matter how much you may want something, you can't make it happen. All the willpower in the world, you cannot make it happen. And you can try, but you really won't. It will exhaust you physically. It will exhaust your cell tissue. It won't, here's the operative word, it won't come naturally. Now, as we close this first session, I want to say that it was, in my experience, what I organized was a thesis that you essentially have 12 archetypal patterns to your personal sacred contract, that each of us shares a child archetype, a prostitute, a victim, and a saboteur. That those 4 archetypal patterns for me are evident in every single person. Everybody has a, excuse me, everybody has a child archetype, and there's many, many faces of the child archetype. There's the, the invisible child and the wounded child and the nature child and the playful child and the abandoned child. And, there's many, 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 but our child archetype is often a combination of all of those, although, many times there's one of the child archetypes that's dominant, but the child archetype is most certainly part of all of our psyches. Everybody has a victim, because the victim archetype is really about empowerment. It's about not being victimized, about the instinct to protect yourself, about developing that survival instinct, and about rising to the occasion of becoming strong enough to protect yourself. So that you feel, you have this sense that it is not right to not protect yourself. So that's what the victim instinct is about. And it is not about victimizing others, but not allowing yourself to be victimized. The saboteur, that archetype is baffling to people because they think the archetype is all about sabotaging yourself, but it is not. This archetype is all about why, figuring out, discovering, and again, here, I'm going to put you back in the building. And this is what I mean about growth. About every floor, you see yourself differently. You have an opportunity to understand yourself differently. And the saboteur is patterns that every single person have. Again, this is the journey we all share. And that the life is really about becoming empowered, not empowered to step up and, tell off somebody or that, none of that nonsense. But you go through that. That's like on the 3rd floor of your building. The actual journey is to get to the place where you recognize the greatest power you have is to channel not personal love, but cosmic love. To be a channel for the force of life itself, which is actually the force of God. And this journey of empowerment is one that transforms you. It transforms you. We'll talk about this in the next class. And that journey is one that terrifies you. It terrifies everybody. This is, again, something we have in common. And that brings out the saboteur in us. We sabotage ourselves because of what change and becoming empowered means, and all that will change in our lives. If we move up a floor in our building, we have to leave our neighbors, and people won't recognize us, and we have to start all over again on another floor of power. We have to get to know ourselves differently if we realize I'm a very different person, right? I expect more from myself. So that's the saboteur. And finally, there's the prostitute. And it's not the archetype I necessarily want to end our evening on, but I will say that this is the archetype that everybody has. And it's the one in which because the first couple of floors of our lives are all about security in the physical world and what we will sell of ourselves for safety. We sell our creativity. We sell our silence. We sell truth. What we will sell of ourselves in exchange for security. And that's the prostitute. And so these archetypes, for me, as I've taught my students many times, we're under contract to battle, to grow with, to explore these archetypes within ourselves. Because through this, we develop esteem for ourselves. These are the archetypes that engage us in the journey of self-esteem. Okay, that's not bad for one class. Next one, we're going to get into the powers of love, light, law, and the power of choice, and how that goes into all that makes you who you are in this life. And let me see. The next class is on co-creation. And that's a biggie. So I will see you all in a couple of days. And thank you so very much for joining me. Bless you all.